This morning, you probably took a pill, maybe for your blood pressure, a painkiller, an antibiotic. You swallowed it without thinking, because you trust it. Now look at the box. The brand sounds local, trusted, familiar. Here's the problem. The brand is from your country. The medicine inside almost certainly isn't. Open your medicine cabinet and you're looking at the most trusted objects you own. We read labels on food. We review restaurants. But medicine? Medicine we swallow on faith. The packaging does everything to earn that faith. The clean design, the pharmacy's shelf, a brand name you've seen since childhood. Every signal says, made carefully, made properly, made here. But a pill is really two things. There's the tablet, the shape, the coating, the box. And there's the molecule inside it that actually works. The industry calls it the active ingredient. And the overwhelming majority of the world's active ingredients are made in a small number of industrial plants, concentrated in Asia, mostly China and India. The company on your box often didn't make the medicine. It pressed it, coated it, packed it, and put its name on it. The thing that saves your life came from a factory you've never heard of, in a place the label never mentions. So, let's follow one. A standard generic pill, the kind that makes up about 9 out of 10 prescriptions, often starts as raw chemicals in one country, becomes an active ingredient in a plant in another, gets pressed into tablets in a third, and lands in your pharmacy wearing a local brand. 3 countries, 4 factories, 1 pill. And the label? In most places, the law only requires the marketer's name. The journey is perfectly legal and perfectly invisible. And here's something almost nobody realizes about the pill itself. Most of it isn't medicine. The active molecule is often just a few % of the tablet, a dust speck of chemistry wrapped in fillers, binders, and coating that exist mainly so your fingers have something to hold. Which means when we talk about where your medicine is made, we're really talking about where that speck is made. The rest is packaging you swallow. Now, the obvious question, surely someone is checking those faraway factories. Someone is, barely. Western regulators are responsible for inspecting thousands of plants scattered across the globe, with a workforce built for factories at home. Overseas inspections are less frequent, and in many cases the plant knows the inspector is coming, weeks in advance. Imagine your restaurant hygiene rating worked that way. A few years ago, the world found out what that gap looks like. Batches of one of the planet's most common blood pressure medicines were recalled across dozens of countries, because plants making the ingredient had been quietly contaminating it with a suspected carcinogen for years undetected. Millions of people took those pills every morning, trusting them completely. It wasn't always like this. The West used to make its own medicine, all of it. Then generics turned pills into the lowest margin products on Earth, and production chased cheap labor, cheap chemicals, and looser environmental rules eastward. One detail says it all. Penicillin, the drug that built the modern world. Western countries barely ferment it anymore. The plants closed years ago, not because we forgot how, because it stopped being worth anyone's while. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because concentrated production is cheap production, right up until the day it isn't. The supply chain isn't just long, it's narrow. India supplies an enormous share of the world's generic medicines. They call it the pharmacy of the world. But India imports roughly 70% of its own active ingredients from China. Go one layer deeper, to the basic chemical building blocks, and the funnel gets even tighter. For some essential medicines, the entire planet depends on 1 or 2 factories, not 1 or 2 countries, 1 or 2 buildings. And buildings have bad days. A few years ago, an explosion at a single Chinese plant wiped out a huge share of the world's supply of one crucial antibiotic. And hospitals on the other side of the planet felt it within weeks. One fire, global shortage. Because here's the second problem, there is no warehouse. Hospitals and pharmacies order medicine the way supermarkets order milk, just in time, days of stock, not months. The world's medicine cabinet has no backup shelf. So, why does the world run its most critical products through its narrowest pipe? Because of a number, the price of a pill. Decades of squeezing turned life-saving medicine into one of the cheapest manufactured goods on Earth. A full course of a common antibiotic can cost less than the coffee you drank this morning. At those prices, only the biggest, cheapest, most concentrated factories survive. Every collapsed competitor makes the funnel narrower and the system more efficient. And efficiency in a supply chain is just another word for no slack left. And governments know. After recent shortages, there have been task forces, strategy papers, speeches about bringing medicine production home. Almost none of it has moved the needle, because rebuilding chemical plants takes a decade and billions, and no health system wants to be the first to pay double for the same white tablet. So the reports get filed, the prices stay low, and the funnel stays exactly where it is. Everyone is betting nothing goes wrong. You're part of that bet. You just never placed it. September 2017. Hurricane Maria tears across Puerto Rico. Most people saw a humanitarian disaster, and it was. What almost nobody saw, Puerto Rico was one of America's biggest pharmaceutical manufacturing hubs. Among other things, its factories produced a huge share of the small IV bags of saline, sterile salt water, used in American hospitals. The storm took out the power grid. The plants went quiet. Within weeks, hospitals across the United States, thousands of kilometers from the storm, were rationing salt water. Nurses stood at bedsides for minutes at a time, pushing drugs into patients by hand, syringe by syringe, because the bags that normally drip them in didn't exist. Surgeries were rescheduled. Pharmacists hunted for workarounds. One of the richest countries on Earth spent months short of one of the simplest medical products ever made. Not because it couldn't make salt water, because it had quietly arranged to make almost all of it in one place, and the weather found that place. And sometimes the failure isn't a shortage, it's worse. In 2008, patients in American hospitals began dying after receiving heparin, a blood thinner used millions of times a day in surgeries and dialysis. The cause was traced back along the supply chain, across the ocean, to raw ingredient suppliers where the product had been adulterated with a cheap counterfeit chemical, one designed to fool the standard purity tests. The most trusted substance in a hospital, contaminated at a source so distant that the hospitals using it couldn't have named the town it came from. That's the price of an invisible chain. When something goes wrong inside it, you find out last. And Maria is just the loudest example. Recent winters have brought antibiotic shortages for children across Europe and America. Cancer clinics have rationed chemotherapy drugs. At any given moment, hundreds of medicines sit on official shortage lists, and most patients only find out when their own prescription is the one that's missing. Which brings us to your pharmacy and your Tuesday. Because this is what a supply chain failure actually looks like from your side of the counter, not a headline, a sentence. We're out, try another branch. If you take something every day for blood pressure, thyroid, diabetes, ADHD, anything, a shortage isn't an inconvenience. It's rationing, substitutions, phone calls, and a quiet dose of fear that arrives with no warning. And notice what it takes to get there. Not a war, not a collapse. One failed factory inspection, one export restriction, one storm in the wrong sea. The system runs beautifully until one building somewhere has a bad month, and the shelf in front of you is where the news breaks. Here's the thing to take away. The world's medicine works like one vast warehouse with 10,000 storefronts. The storefronts are everywhere. The brands, the boxes, the pharmacies, all wearing your language and your flag. The warehouse is somewhere else, and there's only one of it. The brand on the box is marketing. The molecule inside has a passport, and it's probably not yours. So, tonight when you take that pill and trust it with your body, remember what you're actually trusting. A chain of factories you'll never see, in places the label never names, with no spare and no reserve. It works almost every day, and almost is the entire story. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe. There's more where that came from.